Mark Rogers TV previewing 2015 with a stop at the ACC and a first stop for Syracuse in 2014. And it was a rough one after a couple bowl victories. At 1-7 in the conference, 3-9 overall, we bring in John Cassillo of Noon's Magician to help us sort it out for this fall. John, of course, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start at the quarterback position. You've got a new offensive coordinator in Tim Lester. Most of the numbers on offense, very ugly last fall. 6 touchdown passes for the entire season.
One by our punter.
Game. Pardon me?
One of those by our punter.
One by the punter. That's a good note to add. So that makes it an even more anemic number at 5 passing touchdowns out of the quarterback position, assuming you didn't have some halfback options in there. 17 points per game. In this day and age, not much there. 121st ranked in the country. You do have your senior quarterback coming back, Terrell Hunt. Hopefully he can make it coast to coast, wire to wire as the starting quarterback and healthy. So let's start with the passing game and the quarterback position and your thoughts about Hunt coming back for your senior season.
You know, I think that people underestimate just how effective Hunt was when healthy and when protected. Obviously, he's a big guy, and I think for those who've seen his kind of Twitter posts over the offseason, the guy's actually put on even more muscle. He definitely wants to be durable. He's not going to be relied upon as much as he was last year to just continually get beaten up in that backfield. And I'd say forced to run as much as he was, but we're probably looking more at a reversion to 2013 when, you know, Hunt ran when he had to, but really did try to throw the ball. I think based on what we've seen, he's really bought into this new offensive scheme. And I think his understanding of it and his passion for it from all the interviews he's given to local media, it's contagious and it's at least a reason for hope when we as fans really need one.
Again, John, as you well know, it's kind of startling in this day and age when you're used to seeing quarterback statistics at 60, 65%, 2 to 3 to 1 ratios, touchdowns to interceptions, to look over the numbers for the entire quarterback group and see 6 touchdowns, 17 picks. And as we mentioned, 6 total touchdowns, out of the entire football team. And Terrell Hunt, 1 to 4 pick touchdown ratio right there. So let's move to the wide receiver. Steve Ishmael comes back, your most productive receiver from last season, 27 catches, 3 touchdowns. What else is there at the wide receiver core to support Ishmael?
Well, I mean, Ishmael's a great downfield option, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see how he develops, how he gets a little more physical with the college game. I think last year he was just kind of able to do things in single coverage over the top against maybe some of the, less tall defensive backs that he was up against. But this year, I think we're going to see more from the tight ends. They kind of vanished last season. It seems like Lester's going to be employing a 2 tight end set. So guys like Josh Paris are definitely going to get more involved in the passing game. We're going to see guys like Alvin Cornelius and Brisley Esteem get involved, along with Jamal Custis, who played some tight end last year. There's also just the kind of H-back/hybrid role that the team has spelled out that's going to get really involved in passing. Irv Phillips, who our returning top rusher from last year, switches out to that role along with Ben Lewis, who played traditional wide receiver. And I think both of them are going to help the short passing game at least get much, much better as, people are actually blocked for, unlike last year, and it's bubble screen centric attack.
John, the running game could get pretty exotic. You have a running quarterback, a guy who's dynamic in that position in Hunt. You've got a couple of running backs that actually several running backs that are going to line up in different positions. So you could get running yardage out of the quarterback, the traditional running back position, the H-back position. So can you set us up with your running game?
Well, the running game, like I said, Phillips is gone over to the hybrid spot. So we're left with Devontae McFarlane and George Morris, who were minimally used last year, but then this year really get thrust into starting roles. So it's going to be interesting to see how the 2 of them can kind of respond there. We have some freshmen that are going to be moved in particular, somebody like Dante Strickland, maybe a Jordan Fredericks. These are guys who really, really, have a lot of promise, but again, true freshmen. And it might take a year or 2 for them to really adjust the college game.
You're in a league with a lot of great speed rushers, especially in that division with Clemson and Florida State in particular. Louisville has flooded the NFL draft in recent years with defensive line play. Left tackle Sean Hickey off to the New Orleans Saints. The offensive front, how is that stacked for 2015?
We have an interesting group, to be honest. I think, while people might see, oh, you have to replace a lot with Hickey, the fact of the matter is that last year's injuries allowed for so many guys to see the field. I mean, Ivan Foy, been around the starting lineup for about 3 years. Nick Robinson, same deal. Rob Trudeau, our best offensive lineman, moves out to center. Omari Palmer, Jamal McGloster. There's a ton of guys who had, several games where at the snaps last year. And while the results weren't always positive, it's kind of the product of just a bad offensive scheme. And you know what? I think this year we have some depth and some promise, even if it's not glaring right in the onset that there's a true star on this line.
A lot of people like myself, John, saw the Florida State game, saw the Notre Dame game in particular. You were a couple scores back. You were in both games, especially against the Irish at home. The defense played rather well. So as shocking and startling and disturbing as the offensive numbers are overall, the defensive numbers, considering being put in a bad position a number of times by the offense, 24 points per game, not bad, 38th in the nation in scoring defense. Unfortunately, 8 new starters. Can you kind of go unit by unit and set us up for the Syracuse Orange on D?
Sure. Obviously, there's turnover, and I don't think that should be downplayed at all. But at least at the top of the depth chart, we do have some experience returning. Not much after that. I know on the blog we were talking about kind of the dire straits we're in if a couple of these guys get injured, especially along the front four. Ron Thompson's your impact guy. Last year, he kind of had a shift between defensive end and defensive tackle. He's quick. He's ridiculously athletic. He's a guy, if we can keep him at defensive end, he could really make an impact and be one of our, if not the next big, pass rusher for Syracuse. Linebackers, we've actually done pretty well in that position in recent seasons. And while we do shuffle out some more guys, Cam Lynch in particular, just a great, solid guy who over the 4 years he was at Syracuse managed to go from special teamer all the way up to someone getting all ACC consideration. But some of them getting injured last year allowed for guys like Paris Bennett and Zaire Franklin and Marquez Hodge, who are probably going to start the season. As those 3 linebackers, all of them getting some great reps. So these are all underclassmen who now have some in-game experience. I think where things have been rough lately, and might be again this year, is the secondary. You got a guy in Julian Wiggum who, is a senior, has played well, but is really a high risk, high reward type corner. And that kind of puts a lot of the onus on these safeties. We've got a couple sophomores and some redshirt freshmen contending for those starting roles. So it's going to be iffy. I'm not going to make any guarantees with what happens with this secondary. I just hope that it becomes a little bit of addition by subtraction, given the turnover over there.
John Cassillo joining us from Noon's Magician. John, as you well know, a fast start is imperative here. Rhode Island to start things off, a light touch in Wake Forest that a lot of people anticipate as a battle for last place in the division. Central Michigan before you dive in with an LSU coming to town. South Florida, that's a winnable game, and then we move on down through the ACC. Obviously, you play in the tougher of the 2 divisions in the ACC, and the real rough stretch. This is about as difficult as it gets with Florida State, Louisville, and Clemson back to back in late October, moving into November. So that's the stretch in trying to turn around from 3-9 and 1-7. So this is kind of my state of the program question, John. When you look at the abyss that was most of the 2000s, and then the turnaround to go 7-6, 7-6, win back-to-back bowl games against decent quality competition in West Virginia and Minnesota. I know there was a coaching transition there between Doug Marrone moving to Scott Schaefer. So that's huge and needs to be accounted for. Then you plummet in your first year in the ACC. So where's the aberration? Is it the 3-9 last season, or is it the back-to-back bowl victory teams?
To be honest, I think it's the back-to-back bowl victory teams. The 2012 squad was a senior-laden team, one that really bought into Marrone's system, and one that was the only top 40. If you look at certain advanced metrics like team that SU put on the field in the last decade. So I think that is an anomaly, but I think the 2013 team isn't too much to ask from most Syracuse squads. A 7-6 team that can get to a mid-tier bowl and compete with a decent team from another major conference.
Okay, John Cassillo from Noon's Magician. One last thing here, John. It doesn't look like it's setting up for a productive season, and it's going to be difficult to get to postseason play. Maybe you go 3-1. I think that's probably the formula, non-conference, and then you go 3-5 and pull out some upsets and get to postseason play. Is there any particular portion of this football team or anything going on with the current team as you move through August that you're hanging your hat on in terms of optimism?
I'll be honest. I think that while we started the offseason very tepid about what happens with this passing game, I think we've heard more and more good things about how these players are being used, how it seems like we're going to be causing a lot of mismatches. I mean, obviously all words at the moment, but the offense, and we were talking about this internally at the News Magician staff, was that, even an upgrade to the 80th or 75th best offense for Syracuse is still a huge difference for a squad that was, in the 120s last year. And it could mean a difference of, 2 wins. And that, no, 5-7 doesn't get you to a bowl, but it's a step in the right direction from last year's disaster. And I think that this offense can be better and will be better. And as a result, the team should be more competitive.
So for the younger folks out there, this is a very proud football tradition going back to Jim Brown and then going all the way through to Donovan McNabb and an Orange Bowl appearance out of the Big East. So we bring in John Cassillo from Noon's Magician, rely on him to provide insight on the Orange and the rest of the ACC. John, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks, Mark.